I'm Phyllis, and welcome to my Southern Simply Kitchen, where Southern food is simply done. Today, we're going to be making another one of my childhood favorites. It's oyster stew, and it's something that we only ate in months that had an R in them. And my dad loved oysters. I love oysters, and I'm kind of like the Forrest Gump of oysters. I can think of all kinds of things to make with them. But today we're going to be making oyster stew. And oyster stew just has a few simple ingredients, and it's very easy to make. So let's get our ingredients together. And what I use is 3 cups of milk. And like I always tell you, just use whatever you have. You don't have to go out and buy something special. This is just regular milk. We have a 12-ounce can of evaporated milk. I have salt and pepper, 2 tablespoons of butter, and my butter's always unsalted because that's just normally what I use. And then I have 16 ounces of standard oysters. Oysters come in standards and selects, and I buy the standards because selects cost more, and in this particular application where we're just putting them in a soup, it doesn't matter. So I don't spend the extra money and buy the selects. I go for the standards. And my store only has them in 8-ounce containers. You may find them in a 16-ounce, but it takes about 16 ounces of oysters. So get your ingredients together and we'll get started making our oyster stew. Okay, it's time to get started putting our ingredients in the pot. And so I'm going to turn mine on a medium flame to get started. And we're going to add our 2 tablespoons of butter. And we are going to put in the whole can of evaporated milk. And I just opened mine with a can opener and took the top off to make it easy to pour. And then we need our 3 cups of milk. And this is how you start it out. And we're going to leave it on a medium and let the butter melt and the milk get warmed up while we get our oysters ready. And so I've got to grab my scissors, and while we're waiting just a minute, I'll be back and I will be ready to show you how to do the oysters. And I use a wooden spoon to stir mine, and you need to keep stirring every once in a while just because you don't want the milk to scorch. So we'll be back in just a second when I have my scissors. Okay, I told you to hold on. I'd forgotten my scissors, so I'm all set up to do the oysters. And so I have this little sieve that I like to just pour my oysters in and let the oyster liquor drain out. And as you see right there, I just got a little crab in there. As my husband would say, that's just extra. But and so I drain the oyster liquor out of the oysters because if there happens to be any pieces of shell in there, I don't want it in my soup. And here's another little crab. So I guess we're just lucky today. And so move those out of the way. And so to get started, I like to cut the oysters up, and I like because I like to have them in every bite. And so you can find you a nice oyster and kind of feel the oyster. And what I do, you can find this little tough place in the oyster, and it's usually a little circle. It's where the oyster was attached to the shell. And I hold it by that little spot. And then I cut my oyster up, usually into about 3 pieces. And this little mussel I'm going to put over to the side. And we're not going to throw them away. I'll show you what we're going to do with them in a few minutes. But I've got to get my oysters all cut up. And so see, there's another one. And just continue cutting them up and putting your little mussels over in a container. And anyway, I'll get mine cut up. I need to stir the milk. And because remember I told you, keep stirring it. You don't want it to scorch or scald. And so we'll be getting ours ready. So we'll be back in just a few minutes, and I'll have these all ready. Okay, as you can see, I finished separating the adductor muscle from the oysters, from the regular part of the oyster, and I've cut my oysters up into small pieces. And so I promised you we weren't going to throw these away, we're going to use them. So what I do is I'm going to put these in there, and with the oyster liquor, this is the liquid that is when you open up an oyster shell, this is the liquid that's in there. And so, and why don't I just throw in some whole oysters in here? Because sometimes whenever the little adductor muscles, especially on a bigger oyster, it can be a little bit tough whenever you're eating your soup. And so I thought of this, just take it and we're going to blend it up. And I use my immersion blender. If you don't have an immersion blender, that's just fine. You can use a regular blender, you can throw them in a food processor, or you can just you could chop it up by hand just really finely. But so I'm going to buzz this up. So give me just a minute. And I just keep working on it till it's, see, I've got some big pieces there still. So just throw them back out and we'll blend it up a little bit more, and it may even spray you a little bit, but that's okay. That's why you wear an apron. And so I think that is good. And so now these are cut up in little bits, and what this is going to do is going to let you get oyster in every bite of your soup, and it gives it a much, you get the oyster flavor in all of your soup. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pour this in my pot. And so as you know, we started out with 3 cups of milk, and we've added 12 ounces of evaporated milk. Now we're adding the oyster liquor. So your pot's getting fuller and fuller. I think this is probably 4 servings of oyster stew. And then I have my oysters here, and I like to put them in kind of towards the end. I'm going to bring up the heat on this a little bit, and I'm going to taste it too, because we have not put any salt or pepper in here, because I didn't know how much salt it's going to need, because the oysters and the liquor are not in here, weren't in here yet, and so it changes the flavor, and especially the saltiness of it. And it's not terribly salty right now, and so I'm going to put in about ½ teaspoon of salt, and we are going to put in some pepper. And I like for my oyster stew to have a bit of pepper in it, so just give it a good little bit of pepper there, and freshly ground pepper if you have it, and if you don't have it, use that can of pepper that you have in your cabinet. And you can use white pepper and it will look prettier. You won't see the pepper flakes in there, but I am not a fan of white pepper, so I always use black pepper. And so we're also going to now dump in our oysters, and use your spoon to do that so they don't splash up on you. And then just keep stirring. And what we're looking for, we're wanting this to come up, you don't want a rolling boil, but you want it to be bubbly around the edges, and a foam, kind of a little bit of foam will form on the top, and that's when you know it's ready. You could also just know that you don't want to bring it to a rolling boil, because you could break your milk. So anyway, I will stand here and stir this, and you keep stirring it all during the time when you're doing this, because you don't want your milk to scald. So just keep stirring and keep looking at it, and we'll be back in just a minute, because I know mine will be ready in just a minute. Okay, mine is almost perfectly ready right now. You see the little foam starting to form on the top. I'll show you. And see it there on my spoon. And so that's when I know it is ready. But you can also use your instant read thermometer and just stick it in there. And this is at 180, around 180 degrees. And so that's what you're looking for. And like I told you, you keep stirring this around as long as there is a flame or heat on it. And so I think this is ready. And so what we're going to do is we're going to taste it. And you can see there how pretty it looks. You've got lots of oysters there on top. And whenever you scoop up some, there's just oysters in every little bite. And the milk part is so good. And when we serve this, we like to eat some hot sauce in ours, and we like to eat it with little saltine crackers. And so let me give this a taste. And oh, that is so good. You can taste the briny and saltiness of the oysters. You've got the creaminess of the milk and the little bit of sweetness that milk gives it. And then you've got that butteriness from the butter and just a little bit of heat from that black pepper. Oh, and when you put some Texas Pete in there, this stuff is going to rock. So from my Southern Simply Kitchen to yours, enjoy.